Hello, everybody. Great to see you. As promised, I wanted to do an update about the state of Blackpool Council politics and whatnot, as we discussed at the beginning of the year. Um, Back in sort of around Christmas time, I sort of made the decision: how do we reach out to more people in Blackpool about what goes on in the council chamber? And a number of discussions with several different people sort of prompted me to say, okay, why don't we basically put together a plan that allows us to promote the webcasts and so on? So on Wednesday we had our first full council. There's a packed agenda in that meeting, and I decided to write about 2-3 o'clock-ish. I then put all the webcast links out so as many people could watch it, and that worked really well because about midnightish, about up to 600 people had watched it, and so much so that I was really disappointed when it was taken down by the council to be edited because nobody could reach those links anymore. And when they put it back up, it was down to about 140 on the new links. So that was frustrating. But a lot of people saw what happened. So what I'm going to do in this particular weekly update is tell you what happened in that meeting on Wednesday, and and explain just a few things of why I'm so angry and so on. So right, so there are a number of bits and bobs that I need to tell you. So the agenda contained big items on finance. It had obviously issues of where the councillors could talk about the things that are in the council agenda, about delivery of services from roads, how we manage taxis, etc., etc. We also had councillor allowance increases, and then we had two motions on devolution and child grooming. So on finance, I had previously asked a question about how the ropes were being paid for by Blackpool Council when this thing was being mothballed. They'd taken out a massive loan, and it came back around so much money was being paid for by the sports centre at the time to pay this loan off. Oh, that's not very good. How much? And then it came back £390,000 of taxpayers' money had been used to prop up or pay this loan off, and I was furious. This is absolutely not acceptable that you borrow money for something that doesn't even do what it was intended to, because it's eventually mothballed, and that money is then taken from a service paid for by council payers to allow them to enjoy certain things, and we just are costing taxpayers huge amounts of money, and this makes no sense to me. It makes no sense whatsoever. And I was like, this can't be allowed. This isn't acceptable. So I got a bit of a weak answer, a pre-prepared answer, because I knew I was going to ask it. And I said, well, not good enough. Has there been an investigation? So what I intend to do with it is write to our internal auditor and ask them to do an investigation, and I'll write to our external auditor and ask them to do an investigation. And I just cannot believe these things are going on and that everyone thinks that's okay. So I've then also asked on the night what other things are being paid off, because Blackpool Council has borrowed about £500 million, interest payments, give or take, 22 million a year. How many other loans are being repaid by in revenue-based services rather than the payments of those loans themselves? So we live at a time when we're having to cut services, we're having to put taxes up. Our working balances, for example, should be around 7 million. They're below 50,000. That means next year's budget has to repopulate all of that with new monies. But that's money's taken out of services. So we're now cutting children's and adults' services and a few other things probably, just to try and fix the damage of that. So I'm really angry. And I was not going to let this go, and I'm not. I believe in the truth. I believe in good process. I love audit. So I'm just going to keep asking until we get to the bottom of how we are managing our monies, our loans, because ultimately it affects delivery. And delivery was a key theme on the night for us. Absolutely, delivery. So, for example, another question I asked was around the loan repayments on the Hounslow Centre. We borrowed 47.6 million, I think. We've also borrowed more to build a cinema. How are they doing against how are they performing against the original targets? So I wanted to know that. And I'm just going to keep asking until we get all of this information, and we can absolutely support the council officers with all the support they need to make sure we don't keep making these mistakes, because ultimately it affects the people of this town who have some of the lowest wages but pay some of the highest tax. And I'll give you an example of that. Band C pays £2,025 a year. That's some of the highest tax, and that's going up again in a few months. And on the question of delivery, some of the members asked about the state of the roads, how they've been managed. It takes 2 years plus to get a yellow line. I've had a number of issues on that. I've had a number of issues getting roads repaired, and it's always money. Actually, I don't think it is anymore. I think it's just the way we're managing it, judging by how things are promised to me and never seem to happen. And I know other councillors feel the same. The councillor that asked that question got a response back, which was open your eyes, as if everything's fine. Well, it isn't fine. And so we're going to keep asking that as well. And you can see it all in the webcast. And then we also asked, a colleague asked a question around taxis in Blackpool. So we have Uber recently been issued a license. Obviously, there's a lot of taxis issued under Warrington licenses here. So we wanted to know about child safeguarding, sexual exploitation training for those all taxi drivers, and has it been carried out? And also, are we doing mystery shopping exercises, and can councillors go on them? So all taxi drivers, regardless of the licence, are treated the same. That's what we want to see. So we're pushing that really, really big. So then we get on to, and you see it all on the webcast, which I've got a link below. Then we get to this area. So financially, we're not performing well. We're not performing well at all. We then get to the point where we're now coming to councillors' allowances, and I'm like really cross at this point in the debate, really cross. So what happens? The proposal comes forward, 2.5% increase on council allowances. Now, I've not taken an increase on any allowances for years, certainly not the last two. I refuse them. And I know other councillors do the same, and some donate their allowances to charity. But no, not the Labour councillors. They voted for it. They think they're worth it at a time they're delivering less. They're putting council taxes up. And it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. The Conservative councillors voted against it. Reform councillor voted against it. But what annoys me about this subject is that they seem to take everybody down with them. So the newspaper article the next day says something like, councillors vote for council allowance. So that reflects on all of us. At a time we're asking for people to suffer with increased tax, less services, we're giving ourselves an increase, and backdated as well. Absolutely shocking. So my anger levels are through the roof at this. So at this point, we then go into the two areas of the motion. So I put forward two motions, one on devolution and one on the very sensitive subject of child grooming. I'll take them separately and then go through what actually then happened on the night as regards the webcast and how it ended up being edited. So devolution, most boring subject ever. No one's interested, and I certainly never used to be when I wasn't a councillor. And so I stand up and I make this speech as to why it does matter, and I talk about my experience in Cheshire East. And Cheshire East eventually saw councils like Congleton, Maxwell, Crewe, and elsewhere merge. But eventually then what happened was everything gets more centralised, you're further cut away from your council because it's further away, and then the decisions aren't quite as localised. So the tip closed in Congleton. It has impacts on the library services. Because you have something called a local plan, that was affected. That protects where your developments go. So suddenly all these speculative developments were going through. Good farming land was suddenly a housing estate. And I'm like, well, how does that happen? And then you find out, well, actually, those old councils did matter. So I make this speech. And at this point in the webcast, when you watch it, you'll see I'm just totally exasperated by the response I get. I'm just like, what is going on? It's like we live in this almost like this post-truth world where you can just make stuff up and or just not even be sort of seeing what's going on in the world, the reality of it all. So I'll give you an example. Congleton East Tip wasn't closed by Labour. Sorry, it wasn't closed by the Conservatives. I was like, it was. I used to live there. I know a lot about Congleton. And it was like, oh, it's only about devolution. I was like, the government have produced a white paper that talks directly about reorganisation. The local Labour MPs have signed up to it. They've written a letter doing so. There's been a paper produced by the Burnley MP, and in it talks about merging councils. Blackpool Wire filed with Lancaster, and some are now proposing East Lancashire, Lancashire, West Lancashire, or even Lancashire. So we know it's going on, and the white paper says that you've got to have them in by October. If you don't, they'll impose something. So the very fact that it was like, oh no, we won't write to the government and tell them we don't want Blackpool to be broken up. Now, I have some sympathy with a Wire Blackpool filed council because we're on the filed coast. I can see absolutely the logic how that would work. But if we don't get this right, it puts at risk all the things that we love. Blackpool Transport will be at risk because of the franchising system that we're seeing with mayors. Who would look after the Winter Gardens and the Tower? People have a love for those institutions, those buildings. But if you don't have that connection to them, would you subsidise them, support them in the same way? So I was just appalled at this point. I was like, well, how can you not see what's here in front of us? And then throw in obviously the state of our finances. And I'm just really, really cross. And that then takes us to the very, very sensitive issue of child grooming. So I'm going to tell you where I am with this and how I've got to where I've got to. So in January, beginning of January, I saw some tweets by Robert Jenrick, and I was appalled by the content of them. They were just horrifying. Robert Jenrick had made the decision, and rightfully, I think, to just say what's gone on elsewhere. And no hiding it, no making it more palatable. He literally said, this is what it is. This is what's gone on. And you couldn't hide it. It was horrific. And it haunted me, and it haunted anybody else that saw it. And it made me question, well, Blackpool's never had an inquiry. We've done lots of different things, but we've never had an inquiry to review it. So I thought, actually, I think we should do something. I think it's time we, as councillors, took that on. So I spoke to the group and issued a statement that we should be in part of this inquiry. And I was just so upset about it, actually, what's gone on when I read it. And then, we put a motion forward, very non-political motion. Wording was very sensitive, very caring, very respectful, and a big reminder that this is about the victims. No one else but the victims. They're what matter. And if anything, in terms of politics, it was going to be the Conservatives who took one on the chin here, because we were the ones who haven't done anything when we had power on child grooming gangs. In terms of inquiries and so on. So the first thing I do when I stand up is I apologise. And I generally meant that. I'm so sorry. I'm going to say it now. I am so sorry. 14 years as a councillor, not doing anything, not asking for an inquiry. And I'm ashamed that I didn't. And now, and at the end of that speech, I say, I've made my peace with this. Now everyone make theirs. And let's do this. Let's call for an inquiry. And let's ensure Blackpool's included in it. Now, when I stand up, there are a number of people, members of the public, who attended that night to watch, and they were there, very respectful, and they held up some posters about Charlene Downs, one of the poor children that's gone missing 20 odd years ago, and at this point, as I stand up, the council cut the broadcast. I disappear. So the broadcast is still running, but I disappear. You can't hear me, you can't see me. It's I'm doing my speech. And I only find this out afterwards. So nobody sees me say sorry. And I was really annoyed about that because that's so important in this topic. Always about sensitive language, respect for the victims, and so on. So my broadcast gets cut, and the reason is going to the council. They were concerned what was going to happen, and it was like, well, nothing was happening. You could see what was happening, and so I make my speech. Councillor Michelle Scott, my deputy, she stands up and she says, and makes a brilliant speech, and she says, I'm equally appalled what's gone on. She'd also read the Robert Jenrick tweets, and she then says something absolutely crucial, that she had had a text from the Lancashire Constabulary saying that beware of child grooming gangs in your area. So this thing's still happening. This is happening in Blackpool today. Um, and the bit about the inquiry that I wanted to cover specifically about Blackpool is that it should have about coastal areas, impacts on why, because coastal areas have lots of people coming and going. It has amusement arcades, has all the sort of things which have children in them, that attracts children, and therefore makes them more vulnerable. And none of those things seem to be being discussed. So I'm thinking, right, okay, but the Labour group have put an amendment into this motion, and they basically watered it down so much that they're not even going to write to the Home Secretary and ask her to include Blackpool, and they're just really going to wait the outcome of the what the Home Secretary is going to propose in Easter. And I'm like, well, why don't you want Blackpool included? And I'm just totally bewildered at this point. It makes no sense to me, because we're not asking for anything, just the basics, that this would only benefit Blackpool. So I stand up, and now this bit is broadcast, and you'll see it below. It's towards the end of the video. I actually say, well, I'm really angry. I feel ashamed. I'm just, because I'm really wound up by all these things that just don't seem to work anymore. And I say, well, you've opened yourselves up to the accusation. I won't say it, but others will. You've opened yourselves up to the accusation about what you got to hide, and I'm not going to be part of this anymore. And well, then it erupts on the other side, and Councillor Ivan Taylor, you can hear him shouting, um, and then it gets to they put this amendment in. They have a vote, and as it gets to the vote, where they do a recorded vote which puts your names to it. At the end of that vote, Councillor Ivan Taylor, I've written it down here, so shouts out, "We're doing it!" And then the place erupts. All the public are really angry. It's like we're not at a football match. You know, we're meant to be respectful for everybody, victims past, present, and we're all like, what? Councillor Jim O'Neill absolutely rightly calls it out and says, "Look behind you," and says, you know, the picture of a young girl there. And how can you be, you know, just what are you doing? And this is the point in the video. This council take this down. They edit all that out because they're worried that things are being said. And people are rightly angry though. They've been so respectful. And then, so you'll see this amended video now that's gone out. So you won't see my speech, but they have then tried to find some sound, and they put some of the speech in now, but it's all black because they didn't record it, which I'm really angry about anyway. And then you've got obviously this. So I'm just so angry about what's gone on this week. You know, our finances, council allowance increases. Then you've got what they've done on this. I'm just like, how is this town being governed so badly? Blackpool deserves better. And I'm like, my anger levels are like, so I literally say, I'm fuming, I'm ashamed. And as soon as that meeting's over, I just walk out. I'm going home. I'm just fed up. I'm really am. I'm so cross. Can't continue, and I'm going to keep calling it out. So what do I intend to do about this issue? Well, as leader of the Blackpool Conservative Group, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write to the council. I'm going to ask them who was the portfolio holder for children's services between 2003 and 2007, who was the scrutiny chair of children's services between 2003 and 2007, and who was the cabinet assistant for between 2003 and 2007, because I've got the information for everything else, but I haven't got that. And then I'm going to put all that information together, and I'm going to formally write to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. I'm going to formally write and ask her to include Blackpool in it and other coastal towns, and what's happened to the victims, what's happened with county line gangs, the criminal element of all of this, in terms of driving drugs and God knows what around the place. And then make sure Blackpool's included in terms of what's gone on in the past as regards the abuse of children sexually. And I'm going to include our MPs, I'm going to write to Robert Jenrick, I'm going to contact the national press, and I'll make sure that Blackpool is included in this, because I am so angry about what's gone on this week, and I'm not going to stop doing this. Now, people have said to me, oh, be careful, because you've got to make sure that you're okay, because you don't know what happens threat wise or whatever. So I tell you now, I'm not going to be threatened by anyone on this. I'm going to keep calling it out until we make sure Blackpool is included in any inquiry. And because I'm just appalled at what I've seen this week, and I'm going to get to the facts. I'm going to get the facts. I'm going to get the truth. I'm going to be very polite about it, very respectful. But for the good of Blackpool, this cannot continue, because I am very, very angry. Thank you for watching. I'll put the web cast below. I'll put the my motion and their amended motion below it, so you can see what they've what's gone on. But thank you for watching, and please continue to follow, like, and subscribe as we carry on this journey to get to the truth of how Blackpool is being run, because it's just not good enough. Blackpool deserves better.